have a couple of like main models. I have 3 main models during the season. I have 3 main models for the draft, but they've all been sort of mouse-trapped with add-ons of what we've been able to learn over the past few years with so much more data. I mean, now that the next-gen stats in particular are almost 10 seasons worth of data, that actually changes a whole bunch of things from when I first started coding models when we didn't have access to those data points.
Well, Cynthia, welcome to the middle.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here.
I'm so excited to have you. I wanted to ask you, you're so involved in the football world. And when we talk about fans and how fans consume football and how the media consumes football, it's so narrative driven. We have like, he's a clutch quarterback or they're having a breakout season. Why do you think storytelling is such a big part of a football game in the league?
Well, it's all about why do you care, right? Like the half of the reason that you're watching, you either love someone or maybe you hate them. It doesn't matter. But like either way, the whole point is to have a connection point with the players on the field so that it gives some meaning to what happens, right? We're very fortunate the way that football is structured with only 17 regular season games and then the playoff structure being the way it is and then one Super Bowl. Then you always know when the end is, right? There is a winner. It is clear. It is defined. There's no confusion. There's no having to interpret point systems or any of that stuff. And so how do you backtrack into caring during the season? It's the stories of the humans behind it, the humans powering the game that really make a big difference.
Do you think it's those stories that the fans maybe either hear or even build up about themselves? Do you think that's what they enjoy almost more than watching the game? Because I know I get into that sometimes. I want to see, like, is Josh Allen going to do it this game?
I think there's like, what is it, like valence and the axes, right? We'll go back to my like business school days, right? Like your like how like arousal and valence, right? And so like that tension that you feel, it doesn't necessarily like arousal can be like you can be anxious. It just means like are you engaged?
Yeah.
So you want that tension and then the valence of like how much you care, right? Like how is it positive or like it's a very interesting dichotomy but football really does a good job. Even if a team isn't good, there's always a tension in that moment. Okay, are they playing for their coach not to get fired? Okay, are they playing for whatever? Are they playing for a chance to make the playoffs or the first draft pick? Like there's so many different tension points and the NFL has done a really good job of creating storylines that thread through the entire year to kind of capitalize on, both of how you feel when you're watching, but also how you feel about the potential hope for the upcoming season. We're Lions fans. I know you are.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
how many times did we win the draft? We great draft for a couple of years from now. It's gonna be great, right? Like so, we've been good in recent years, but growing up, there were some lean years.
Was not.
Some lean years.
I was gonna get to that. Well, and when you were talking, it made me think like, we again Lions fans, same old Lions. Like that is a narrative that you would hear for decades when I was growing up. Are there common stories that you hear right now about teams or players that tend to stick, even if things may change week to week?
Yeah, I mean, we all want to be able to relate to, like, it's interesting, right? The Bills, they go so far, but they like never win the big game. So can Josh Allen finally get that monkey off of his back and win the big one in the big moment, right? So you could say the same thing about Lamar Jackson. I think it's overcoming obstacles because it's something we can all relate to. There's something about football. It's uniquely American. It feels like the American dream, right? Like to come from nothing and to be able to win the Super Bowl, like that's crazy. And to a team that, a couple of years ago wasn't very good and now has ascended to it's funny because like, okay, I'm going to play the world's smallest violin for Patriots fans because like they've had such a good run. But, it's like, okay, nobody expected this team to make it to the Super Bowl this year. And they get there and maybe they didn't win, but still like that's a great story climbing this mountain that they didn't expect to climb, especially this fast. So, I mean, there's just all these things that we can relate to as in any job, in any part of our life. And football is just this microcosm. And the fact that we play it in, at about the same time, right? Thursday, Sunday, or Monday, most weeks, like that we all come together in a certain way and we connect on these themes that are, again, very, very, they thread throughout everyone's life.
And I think like there's always to me, there's always like a hero and a villain. I mean, the refs are often a villain, maybe sometimes deservedly so. There's always this kind of like, or there is that, to your point, that tension of it really is that story of how do we want this game to end up? How do we want that player to end up? Why do you think those labels, like I'm going to talk like Kirk Cousins. You know, there's that label that he can't win in prime time, and it's followed him from team to team. Why do you think those labels are hard to shake?
Because you really do, unless you're like a massive or you work in it or you're a massive, massive fan that watches all 32 teams, which there are plenty of, you don't have there's just so many even a team that plays in primetime a lot doesn't play in primetime a lot. Like the Chiefs play a lot, but Kirk Cousins hasn't been playing in primetime as often as the Chiefs lately, but it's still not a lot of sample size. So the one time you are seeing it is Monday Night Football, it is Sunday Night Football, the biggest stage, it feels so huge, and you don't see a win. But it's not necessarily always Kirk Cousins' fault. But, as the leader of the team, you get probably overestimated when they're good and probably underestimated when they're bad.
The narrative shift. Like we see it right now. So we're in the off season, but we're going into the draft, and there's already narratives forming around the teams, what they need to do in the draft. And I want to talk about the draft a little bit later. But how quickly have you seen these narratives form? I mean, I'm even thinking like this wasn't obviously Drake May's rookie season, but like within a couple games this year of how all of a sudden it was just he's on top of the pedestal. I mean, they form within what feels like weeks. Do you see that on your end?
Yes and no. I mean, maybe I'm, like, a little more entrenched in it than other people just because
Yeah,
I
yeah.
like, my inbox is full of, like, thousands and thousands of emails about, like, all these articles that get written about every team. But I think a lot of it is, we have turning points and we have these inflection points where you see someone on a national level and it feels like it's defining them in some way for better or for worse. Now, I think one of the narratives that's up and coming in recent years that I really like, and maybe Sam Darnold has a lot to do with this, but like really getting us that rehab, that second chance for Daniel Jones, for, Sam Darnold, like that's a story we all like too, because everyone loves a second chance. So everyone loves to, overcome bad obstacles. But a lot of it really has to do with winning, right? Because the whole point is to win. And you're either in the off season right now, we're talking about who could win. Did this trade make you more likely to win or not? And we've had the most trades we've seen. We've had 18 trades since the league new year, which is like a lot. Usually we're tracking less than that and we're not even close to the draft yet, right? So when you're looking at what all of these drivers are, we all in life, like a lot of our jobs are less win and loss driven, right? Like, not many people, maybe bankers, but like not many people have like a defined amount of time where it's like on this Sunday we win, this Sunday we lose, and our lives are a little bit more blended than that, right? And for better for worse, right?
Yeah.
So when you're looking
Yeah.
at the opportunity to measure yourself or see how you've come along over time, you just have to wait a lot longer to be like think about like weight loss before Ozempic. You do like a pound a week, right? And that takes a long time to get to it takes half a year to get to 20 pounds about, right? So that's a long time. Whereas like in football, you get to win, you get to lose, you get like and we get to see that it's fulfilling. There's a huge fulfillment there. And I think a lot of that has to do with like, and now it's like decision time. Like we get to evaluate these decisions. And even though it seems like football's not for forever because it doesn't start till September, that's still not normal business cycles. That's still a very short amount of time compared to other businesses.
Do you think we as fans have confirmation bias? That we want something to happen or we want a narrative to be true, even if the stats are telling us otherwise?
Of course. I think everyone has it in every job, right? We want our belief to be true, whatever that belief is. And sometimes it can be a belief that you're going to choke or whatever, like, it's part of it, right? And it's part of your own you're projecting your own stuff onto that. Like maybe it's too much therapy, but like, I'm projecting my own views on what I believe can happen based on what I've seen in the past. And we all are looking for patterns. That's what our brain is wired to do, is to look for patterns. So your confirmation bias is one of the more understandable biases that there happens to be, because think about it, like, you're looking for a pattern when you wake up. Like, how many data points are you getting every single second? So you're looking for patterns always.
How did you get into all this? Because you have such an analytical brain. How did this path start for you?
Really randomly. I was working on the banking side at ESPN, so buying big tech. At the time, it was called big data. I am dating myself, but I was doing that, and then Paul DePodesta of Moneyball fame got hired by the Browns to work in their front office, and nobody really understood how to talk about Moneyball for football. And given my background between banking, but also working in the league office in financial strategy, um, it kind of fell into place that I could start telling these stories. And then I see myself as a little bit more of an entrepreneur in a very well-funded startup, because figuring out how to tell these data stories in a very mature company like Disney at the time, and then I came home to the NFL for the past 10 years, that was like, it's a tricky thing to try to do something new in a very well-organized, well-established, mature company that mints money. So getting them to talk about, to try to do something different is an interesting challenge. I guess that's what I was looking for.
You mentioned data tells a story, because and I love that because it does. And I come from tech, which that was like a phrase we lived and died by, is data tells a story. But I think people often maybe don't think of that. Maybe the everyday fan doesn't think of analytics as storytelling. So how do you describe the story the numbers are trying to tell when you have to talk to folks?
But I mean, the difference between 10 years ago and now, people are far more familiar with, I mean, AI. Now, do I think people know what AI necessarily means? I don't know. But do I think people know what analytics means? I don't know, because now all the broadcasts have sort of made it seem like there's this like analytics overlord being like, go for two, like something crazy happening. But I think people understand that there are a lot of sources of data now, and being able to tell like, when we say tell a story with the data, it's not necessarily that you're trying to make the data fit a narrative that is helping your confirmation bias. It's actually the opposite. It's using the data points to figure out what are signals and what to discard. Like, the value of the actual data points 10 years ago was way more valuable. Now they're like infinite data basically, and we're creating more data points daily. So now it's, how do you create, so tell the story, I'm using air quotes here, but how do you find the right lane to take the right data points to use them to be an action item that matters. And in the NFL, the denominator is time, because you have a limited amount of time between each game where you can make adjustments, or you have a limited amount of time in free agency, or you have all of these different things.
You build models. I know you build a lot of models through with your data. What is that when you're building? I guess two questions. One, what does that process look like for you? And when you are building a model, what are those either first signals or first data points that you're looking for?
Oh, I don't even know. I've stopped keeping count. I mean, I play around all the time. I constantly play around. Like, I have a couple of, like, main models. I have 3 main models during the season. I have 3 main models for the draft. I have 3 main like, so, but they've all been sort of mouse trapped with the, like, add-ons of what we've been able to learn over the past few years with so much more data. I mean, now that the next gen stats in particular are almost 10 seasons worth of data, that actually changes a whole bunch of things from when I first started coding models, when we didn't have access to those data points. So that's it. And then, by the way, college data is now completely crazy. So you're
Yep.
adding in all these different sources. So I mean, the main ones are, it's the principles that guide them that are, when I talk about my 3 main models, it's the principles that guide them, not necessarily the explicit code that's in them, because it's like, what
Yeah.
is the philosophy, what is the mission of this model, not what is the, like, I was like a, relational databases. I loved it. I loved Hive. I was like all about it, because I'm ADD, right? So my functional ADD, that was way better for me. Like, oh, I want to pivot it this way instead of pivot it. Great. And I mean, sometimes I still play around with them. Not kidding. Because if I don't understand something, because that's what makes sense to me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Speaking of what makes sense, like how do you translate something that might be really complex that fans can understand? And what I'm thinking of is like how many times I've watched a game where I've been or maybe at, like, the Super Bowl and a team has, a 60% chance of winning, and it's like, that's still a 60% chance, but people are like, "No, they're gonna win, it's amazing, it's 60%."
I don't like those models, because if you don't tell me what's in your recipe, I'm not gonna eat your food. So, anything where some of them I'm sure are very valid and great, and I'm sure I could go through and find the components. Now, I have a win percentage model, and, like, what here's where your listeners should be wary of the model. If anything goes to, like, 99% and then swings back that the other team wins, and that happens more than, like, once in a we're talking, like, bajillion times, like, once in so many like, it shouldn't happen in the NFL, right? We don't have like, if the and I've seen that on these media models because media is for fun, right? It's for a story. It's different. So, but if your model is, like, swinging that then the model's in my opinion, probably not the most accurate. You know, everyone gets mad at me every week when I do my win totals because or my win projections because it's like, "Oh," like, I'm like, "Oh, 58%, that's high. That's a good chance." And people are like, "That is nothing. It's basically a coin flip." I'm like, "No, no. You have to look at, like, the incremental like, for me, like, that is actually 58 is where things become like, where other models would have, like, 70. But it's not 70.
Yeah.
The NFL is not it's parity is in the NFL is very close. Now in NBA or in MLB, and in college, you can certainly get way bigger variances, but think about it, every year teams play quote unquote cupcakes in the beginning of the season because they want wins. That's where you have these like high numbers. But in the NFL, most of these games are going to be closer to 50% because it's actually true.
Do you ever find that the data tells a less dramatic story than fans want?
Yeah, I mean, most of the time. I don't I guess I would argue, like, because I don't think that it's very dramatic ever, that I think it tells an like, it is weird when you see something, like, really crazy, like, really outlier, of course, that's strange, but it's an outlier for a reason, like, the way that I think about it is, in life, like, everything is around an average, right? That's just the way that it works, and so to be like, I don't call everyone elite. Everyone's like, "Elite, elite, elite." I'm like, "No, no, no." I'm not willing to crown Drake May as being even upper echelon yet because he doesn't have enough data points. Like
No.
I'm not saying he won't be or that he's not on a path to be. He is certainly on a path to be above average at least, if not better, but he hasn't done it yet. So, I mean, they're really because I don't give away that it's not hyperbole. We're hyperbolic in the media. We like to say, big things. It's more fun for clicks and whatever. But like, I don't think but I guess my point in that is, like, it's almost more fascinating when you have more average pieces come together to make a team effect for winning as opposed to, Patrick Mahomes doing crazy things because he actually is elite.
Can you think of an example or of a time when there was a narrative around a team or player and it didn't match what the numbers were showing? Like you mentioned Drake May, I'll use our own. Jared Goff gets called a bridge quarterback a lot, but he's actually he's got good numbers. This is gonna be a Lions episode. Let's just prepare the audience for it. Same old Lions. But yeah, especially in the last 5 years since Campbell joined, like it's really not the same old Lions.
I'm worried about this year, but,
I am too. We'll get into that.
but, look, I look at it and I think like, Jared Goff is maybe the original, like, guy who got a second chance. It's just hard to say you have a second chance when you're drafted, and when you're drafted as high as he was, he went to a Super Bowl, and they traded so much equity to get him. Like, there was just a lot of things around him, so it's like, it sets him up to underperform, even though, like, you can't make a cat a dog, right? You're not gonna ask him to you're not gonna ask him to be Lamar Jackson with his rushing capabilities. You're just not. Like, that's not what he does. But when you put him on a team that has a good O-line and give him some good running backs to it and give him if you give him the things to succeed around him, that to me is actually a better use of your data because what you've done then is you've matched the pieces that need to surround the asset. There are not 32 starting caliber quarterbacks in this world. So you don't necessarily need Patrick Mahomes. You probably need the aggregate of Jared Goff plus the O-line we had a couple years ago, plus Amon-Ra, plus Sam Laporta, plus Jahmyr Gibbs, plus David Montgomery, who's not there anymore. You need those things in order to succeed. And then even so, when the defense is all hurt, then it's still gonna go to crap.
How do you separate? Because you have your models and you have the actual stats and the data, but I know that you're putting you're taking into consideration qualitative information. You talk to players, you talk to coaches, and then there's rumors. There's always speculation. So my first question is, how do you separate the speculation? How do you separate out like what may or may not be true?
I kind of take the other angle. So if I don't know something's true, then I put it through the filter of, okay, let's run it through the models if it's true, and let's run it through the models if it's not true, and let's see what's more logical. Because oftentimes simpler solutions are the ones that are right and the ones that we go with. So it to me, like, I like a rumor because then I can evaluate, is there merit to doing, like, whether or not they do it is not my judgment, but we can now evaluate a situation with data. Look, it's easy to be like, oh, the Lions should trade for Aiden Hutchinson. Okay, but or not for Aiden Hutchinson, for Max Crosby to add to Aiden Hutchinson.
Like, don't give them any ideas,
No,
Cynthia.
no, but like to add to Aiden Hutchinson, right? So, but like the reality is like, what would that take? Could they even afford it? What would they be sacrificing? There's a lot going on. That's not a rumor that's like out there, but every team's
Yeah.
hopeful, right? But it's
Yeah, yeah,
it's like
yeah.
what really matters, like, or what really is driving value, and so like you can evaluate rumors with data and see if it's a good strategy or not. Sometimes it's a creative way to find a new thing to evaluate.
How then do you take the conversations that you're having in real time with coaches and players, and how does that feed into your
So
models?
a lot of my in the same way like a ChatGPT, as you mentioned, looks at historical data to find patterns. Well, that's what I'm doing with football too. So what I usually ask coaches were things that outsiders can't really understand. Meaning, what was the safety doing on play 62 in this game against the Bears or whatever? And they okay, and then what's the strategy? Okay, and then can you explain to me how you're using this player and showing false leverage, meaning outside or inside leverage? Are they trying, like, showing them that they'll have space on the outside, but really they're taking that away? Like, how are you showing that ahead of time? And like, what should I be learning from this so that when I'm looking at the data and I'm evaluating what I'm seeing in front of me, that I have the best opportunity to see the right thing. So I'm really asking them to like correct my homework.
That's a good way to put it. Do you think that fans sometimes value, like, a compelling story more than an accurate one? And I'm gonna give an example because I actually heard you say this, because I also wanna ask, do you think the awards value a compelling story more than the data? Because I'm gonna go to the MVP award this year, and for anyone in the audience that doesn't know, Matt Stafford won the MVP award, but I saw an interview with you, I think the week of the Super Bowl, where you were saying that like, one, if we wanna call it the quarterback award, let's call it the quarterback award. But also, like, when you look at who's the most valuable player to their team, was it really Matt Stafford? But he has a compelling story. There's an angle there. So do you think, one, the media or the fans and the media value that compelling story more so than the data? And then do you think the awards do as well?
I think that the fans love a compelling story because you're watching a 4-hour broadcast, so you want as many good stories as possible, especially if the game isn't great. Matthew Stafford was involved in a lot of great games this year, so I'm not really talking about him, but other players. Like, how many times do we hear about, like, certain players off the field, hobbies, like, whatever. You hear that if things get boring. Okay, so I think everyone values something to say when things are boring. Got it. Right, there's that would rank low and to the left on my valence and arousal, matrix, right? So you don't want to be bored.
Yeah.
So I would say that's interesting. But then the problem is certain storylines just don't ever leave, and then I think with the awards, I think what happens is people try to be fair. Like, I'm not a voter, so I don't have I'm not allowed to vote. Or I think maybe I can now that I'm whatever. Maybe if anyone who doesn't know, NFL Network got acquired by ESPN, so perhaps now I could be a voter. We'll see. But long story short, the voting, I think, happens to be like, okay, well, we can give an award to Christian McCaffrey so he can be the comeback player of the year, and then we want Matt Stafford to be there because he's got this like amazing career and we want him to be a part of this. So let's just do that. And I think that's human nature. So I think it's crap because I don't think there was any player more valuable to his team this year than Christian McCaffrey, and I will die on that hill. But I think a lot of that has to do with that. Now you get Christian McCaffrey there and you get Matt Stafford there, and it makes the award show more compelling.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Have there ever been any moments or examples where you trusted the data or you thought something would happen and it completely went the other way?
All the time. I mean, you're never gonna be right In football, I joke about this, but, like, the reason that it's not sexy for some like, if you talk about how data really works, it's like how to be 10% better every game. Now 10% better every game in the NFC South this year would have been massive because you'd be hosting a home playoff game, but 1.7 games, and you just pretend that's, you know, point 0.1 for each game, like, 1.7 games is often the difference between the playoffs or not. So, I'm looking at the opportunity here to be a little better each time. You're gonna get the majority of things wrong. If you can be 10%, if you could like, if there's 120 plays in an NFL game and you can be better on 12 of them, you we talk about a game of inches, it is a game of plays. Those 12 plays absolutely could be the difference maker.
Have you ever had a conversation with a coach or player that made you think or revisit your data?
Well, that's my point. When I talk to my network of coaches and players, I'll have these I spent a lot of time a couple of years ago trying to come up with a metric that values a wide receiver when they're not the subject of a pass. So I call it the off-ball metric. I'm sure I'm not in marketing. I could have a better marketing situation going on, but, when I was talking to players, it's like, "Okay, well, this on this route, this on" like, ho and then where's the value of the running back in that? Because if you have a great pass blocking running back, then it's kinda like you have a sixth O lineman. Like, so we had all these different conversations to come up with the value of what the non-subject of the pass quarterback or wide receiver is to the quarterback. That was like, Justin Jefferson is gonna be a big problem for anyone, even if Jordan Addison is where the ball is supposed to go. It's a fascinating problem to try to solve, and the coaches and players had me go back and forth all of the time about this. But there's one in this particular offseason that comes to mind, which is about left-handed quarterbacks. So, as you saw, Tua Tagovailoa went now to the Falcons, and Michael Penix Jr. is also a lefty. So we have two lefties on the team. And the value of that is me and the coaches were talking a lot about that because some people will say, well, if you could have gotten a better quarterback and da 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 da. But there is a value to having the ball spins a different way. The center has it feels different for the center. It feels different. And so there's an added plus there that we're trying to quantify, but it's hard to quantify because it doesn't really happen.
Have you ever had a coach or player disagree with your data?
Every day.
All the time?
The problem that I have is that, like we were talking about before, with everyone being on the broadcast being like, "The analytics say," they don't understand necessarily that, ESPN created a power index that's different from the way I would do it, that's different than the way that the Next Gen Stats does it, that's different than the way CBS does it, that's different than the way the Ravens do it, that's different than the way it's not there's not one right answer. So when sometimes they have this preconceived notion that I'm going to tell them that they are right or wrong. I'm just trying to tell them that here's a framework and here's a tool to put in your tool belt. Because if I'm on a map and I don't know where I am, I'm gonna have a hard time figuring out what the heck I'm going, right? So it's a tool for your tool belt. It's not like Dan Campbell probably knows that he goes for it on fourth down when the analytics would say not to, but he's gambling with it. Sean Payton absolutely did. He had a backup quarterback. It was snowing, and against the Patriots, like he didn't. That was not the higher probability decision, but he still and you can do that. But it's probably better to know if you're choosing the higher probability or lower, so that when you're evaluating your process later, you know what you did and where you could just like anything. Like if I'm a company and I decide to put my resources into this car versus that car, Michigan example. If I need to know why I made that decision so that when I go back and evaluate if I made money or if I lost money, I can see what if I can look at my decision independent of the result.
You mentioned Dan Campbell going it for fourth down, which I feel like has become part of his identity. I mean, that's just, at least now, in the beginning, maybe we were all a little nervous about it, but now it's just like, he goes for it on fourth down. That identity, stuff like that can be really hard to measure. Is that something that you try to quantify, like that culture, that team culture, the fit? Are there ways to quantify
So
that?
the way I went about trying to quantify it is, number one, how much time do you spend practicing it? Because if it feels think about, like, the psychology of a player. I've never been a player, obviously, clearly, but it would feel a lot different. Like, a lot of times, we used to only see going for it when you were about to lose and it was like a last-ditch effort. Now, if you're using it as a strategic inflection point, then you're practicing it. You're taking into account all of the third down plays that would thus lead to a fourth down play. So you're changing your strategy on third down and everyone's mentally prepared for it. So that's a huge difference compared to a mindset of like, oh shoot, I've got a game. Like I'm on tilt. Like it's not a tilt anymore. It's the main thing.
When everything aligns, when the data aligns,
I'm
when
happy.
the
Just kidding.
story that we're telling, it never
No, it
happens.
happens, but, I mean, you have to there's, like, as many stories as there are players, right? Both in, the what the data says and also what their personal lives say, and, like, yeah, there's tons of stories. It's just a question of is that thing predictive or is it reflexive? And that is, you know, that's where sometimes that's another place where media can sometimes, like, they can use the outcome to
Yep.
recharacterize the decision, which is not the
Rise.
same thing.
How does it feel when it all aligns? Like, do you get a little feeling inside? Like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, the funny part is, like, I actually don't mind when it doesn't align as long as I can see like, my goal for storytelling when it comes to a game would be set up what's most likely to happen in the pregame, right? Then check in halfway through to be like, we're either seeing this thing happen or this is why we're not seeing this happen. Here are some of the ways that we could see um uh halftime adjustments or reactions that would change things, and then, like, at the end, be like, "Okay, they successfully changed where the nickel was lining up," whatever it is, right? And then look what happened. Because it's less about being right for me and more about I'm just, like, one of those kids who's like, "Why? Why? Why?" Like, super annoying. "Why? Why? Why?" So I think that's more I just wanna know why.
When those things don't align, what should fans do to figure out what to trust?
Not be so like, the last play is rarely the one where it's, like, the big miss or the big mess up. There are let's call it 120 plays in a game. You know, if 12 of them are really important, like those 12 could have happened, 11 of them could have happened in the first 3 quarters, and then that last one happens in the last second, like a kicker missing a kick. There are a lot of other things that go into it. So I think take it as a whole and kind of look at it for what it is, not be mad about this one person missing a kick or, a one call that didn't go right. I mean, sometimes that's fair, but just t dial back just a little bit. A little bit more macro is usually better.
And with everything that we've just talked about, like the stats, the numbers,
Mhm.
the stories, the gut feelings, although I hate gut feeling in data, but like football is one of the most analyzed sports.
I think it
But
is the most
it
analyzed sport.
but we get it wrong
Right.
still. I mean, like it still surprises us. Maybe that's a better way to put it. Is it still surprises us? Why do you think it remains so hard to like fully explain game in and game
There are
out?
22 moving pieces on each snap. It's what other sport can say that, you know, you need it is both sequential and individual at the same time. Like, baseball's a little bit more sequential. There's a pitch, and then there's a cascade of other things that could or could not happen. It's interesting, but if the left tackle is doing something wrong, even though the ball's over here, then the whole thing can change. So, I just think that there's no way to you're never gonna get the data's never going to there's not gonna be, like, a shift like we saw in baseball, right? Like, there's no gonna like, there wouldn't ever be one strategy that would make things feel that different in 1 year. Now, it's a pendulum. We'll see, interior rushes went back. Now, I think this year we'll get back to zone rush outside zone rushing schemes again because that's where now if the linebacker's gonna line up here, we'll just pull him out there, like, because and it's chess. You're watching chess with people as opposed to, I don't know. I'm biased though. Clearly, I just think it's more. I just think it's interesting.
No, it's fascinating. Do you think the goal of analytics is to
Hmm.
find the truth of the game, or is it just to help us better understand it?
I would say that the goal of analytics in football is to bring up the average because you have 53 people on your roster. You have, I mean, you have 17 games, and you really if my average pieces in my system function just a little better than your average pieces in your system, then I get to win. So it's the same reason that like chess, it's like, you get to plan a few moves ahead, and because of the way that the cap is structured, we all have to play it feels more fair. We all have to play with the same amount of money and we have the same constraints and the same benefits. And now it feels like there's not when you use the word control, but, like, it feels like there's more ways to change things without being like, "Well, we're just gonna do this max basketball thing and create this team that's incredible." Like, that just can't happen in it, so it feels more fair, right? It feels more like the parity is really true. Like, any team can go from worst to first in a season. The Patriots are the latest example, but, like, everyone does, and I don't think it's not about solving it. It's just about I think part of what the analytics do is allows us to in the way chess doesn't as well, it allows us to be a part of each move, right? Like, you know, it allows us to be a part of each step along the way that gets us to the ultimate goal of winning or losing.
Do you think football would be fun if we could predict everything? If it was just fully predictable?
No, absolutely not. No, but I think if you're using analytics to find better players to do better things. For example, I'm never gonna dunk a basketball, but maybe I'm sick at shooting, threes. Shooting from beyond the arc. Clearly, March Madness has impacted my life right now. But, put me in a position. Don't put me near the rim. Don't put me where optimize me for what's best for me. Like, that's a stupid example, but even thinking about the different body types that dictate an outside linebacker versus a traditional hand in the mud defensive end, put me in no, there's no such thing. People barely play base defense anymore. They're playing like these configurations of fronts that are weird, bear fronts, whatever you want to call them, right? So ultimately, put me in a position where I'm set up best to succeed, and I think analytics can make it so that you can look at a lot of more data faster, so you can make decisions quicker and ultimately deploy your pieces in ways that are more successful, and I think to me, that's the goal, not like any one particular there's no solving it. You can't solve it.
Speaking of solving, the draft is coming up. You said you run models for it. When you run models for the draft, are you projecting not just performance, but development?
That's a funny question this year because we're at this weird I will say this is one of the weirder drafts because you have NIL and, the impact of the transfer portal hitting kind of at the same time. So there are a lot older than kids. There are a lot older men than there used to be, so the developments to me a little bit I'm trying now to understand how to tie it to age because I don't know the consequences of that necessarily fully yet. Because we don't have a lot of, like, defensive players who start their career at 24, just hasn't historically happened, so, we'll give an asterisk, but yes, development is factored into my models, same with schematic fit in a certain person's philosophy, but it's gonna be pretty cool that over the next few years to see the impact of, staying in school longer, being a
Yup.
little older, I don't know, is that great or not? In some ways it could be good, in some ways it could be bad. I mean, the average lifespan of an NFL player right now is under 40 years. So I don't know. I don't know. That's if anyone tells you they have the answer to that, either they're maybe an alien who has view of the future, or they're probably not. Maybe they're overestimating their capability to figure it out.
Oh, I would say I think it's gonna be fascinating the correlation between NIL and player longevity in the league as we look at that. Like, how is that gonna span out over the next decade as NIL becomes just more and more ingrained?
I mean, I don't care about NIL. I think players should get paid, excuse me. I hate the transfer portal. That it needs to be fixed. Because if I'm a grown up taking grown up money to do a grown up thing and have a grown up job, I should be subject to the same grown up contract that a grown up has. It was too punitive before, but I think we've swung too far on the pendulum this way. NIL will sort itself out because money will figure itself out. But the transfer portal to me needs to be there needs to be some I sign a contract because I'm gonna if I was like, "Oh, you know what? CBS is gonna just go pay me more." NFL's not gonna be like, "Okay." The that doesn't happen.
So I have to ask, what is the data showing you for next year for the Lions? Any sneak peeks you can give us on them or any team, I'll say?
I look, they had to deal with a bunch of cap constraints in free agency, and I think the moves they made were smart moves given the constraints that they were forced to deal with. So I'm not saying it's bad. The whole year is going to come down to the O line, as it usually does with the Lions. So Lions O line that will be. Building after Frank Ragnow, never easy. Taylor Decker, of course, wanted to go somewhere else. He's gone too, but we still have Penei Sewell. It will be fine. As for some teams I think that are interesting, I think the Rams, their moves were amazing. Getting Trent McDuffie, it's like they took all the things that were wrong about them last year, and the NFC West is a total nightmare, by the way. But they took what was wrong, secondary, and they addressed all of it brilliantly. Not only did he take Trent McDuffie, but they brought his teammate over from the Chiefs as well. They re-signed Cam Curl. They still have Matthew Stafford there. They pretty sure Puka Nakua is still good. Same with Devontae Adams. So I think the only problem they have is that the Niners. If the Niners can stay healthy, they have a really good team too, and they just added a massive upgrade with Mike Evans. So, I mean, I think the NFC West is going to be where it's at this year from the NFC, and probably your Super Bowl winner.
Well, thank you. This has been delightful. This has been so fun.
Listen, Mid-Michigan girls, we stick together.
We got to Mid-Michigan represent. It feels like, and I feel like when we look at games, and hopefully what the audience takes away from all of this is like, this is a really complex game. Football is a complex game. To your point, you have both the team and individuals at any given point that are performing. So I think I said this when you and I were chatting earlier. To me, the beauty of football has always been there's no single data point or no single story that will ever fully explain the game. And I think that's why we come back week after week.
Absolutely. Like that tension. You need the tension. You need to defy the odds or potentially defy the odds, and that's what football will always be. But I will argue it is better to know the odds and know when you're defying them than not.
Cynthia, thank you for coming on. Thanks for taking the time.
Anytime. Great to meet you.
Thanks for spending time with us in the middle. If today's story caught your attention, drop a subscribe, share the episode, follow us on social media, and remember, it ain't over till it's over.